Have you ever woken up in the absolute dead of night? You know, when the silence is just so heavy, it actually presses against your eardrums, and you get that creeping feeling that you just aren't alone? Well, in today's Explainer, we're diving into a really dark psychological mystery, one that bleeds right from the edges of digital folklore straight into the wiring of our own brains. We're talking about the 3:17 a.m. phenomenon. We're going to unpack a truly terrifying pattern that's hidden in our culture, our stories, and honestly, our biology. So, get comfortable, maybe lock your doors, because we are about to explore what happens when the shadows in our bedrooms actually start looking back at us. 3:17 a.m. In the world of digital folklore, urban legends, and modern psychological thrillers, that isn't just an hour on the clock. It's the modern witching hour. It's a time of, well, heightened supernatural activity. If you look across the internet and literature, we constantly see this exact moment acting as a trigger for the inexplicable. It's like 3:17 a.m. is the exact minute when the thin veil between reality and absolute terror just begins to tear. To really understand this, let's dive into an infamous, deeply unsettling viral story from Reddit's r/no-sleep community. The author talks about moving in next door to Unit 304. It's an apartment occupied by a guy who literally hadn't left his place in 3 years. No packages delivered, no noise, just total silence. But then the author's friend Jenna goes missing inside the building. And that night, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the author hears 3 sharp knocks. But here's the thing. They aren't coming from the front door. They're coming from inside the shared wall. The terror here is just visceral. The author describes crawling into this hidden space between the walls where, quote, the air smelled of mold and something worse, rot. Now pivot with me to another haunting narrative. This one's from a viral YouTube short. Imagine this. A resident is lying in bed. The power in the building is completely dead. And at exactly 3:17 a.m., they hear a soft, patient knock, but not on the door, on the window. And the truly terrifying part? They live on the 4th floor. The glass slowly fogs up from the outside, and you can see the faint outline of a hand with these impossibly long fingers. Right then, their phone lights up with a text from an unknown number. It just says, "Open the window, I'm freezing." And then, the latch clicks open, completely by itself. Okay, let's play detective for a second and map this whole thing out. First, we have Carol A. Campbell's psychological thriller, Don't Open the Door, where the main character, Olivia Hayes, is tormented by a knock on her door every single night at exactly 3:17 a.m. Then we have a Lemonade app post analyzing this bizarre psychological mystery of a digital message that only appears at this exact time. Add to that the 4th floor window entity we just talked about and the rotten walls of Unit 304. Look at that. We have a distinct, terrifying pattern of 3:17 a.m. visitations crossing multiple platforms, different authors, and totally different narratives. So let's go back to Unit 304 for a second. Because what actually happens when the knocking comes from inside the walls? Well, the story's pacing suddenly accelerates. The author grabs a hammer and literally punches through their own drywall in this desperate, frantic search for their missing friend Jenna. They find a hidden crawl space. They're crawling on their stomach through the rot and the black mold, and they actually find her. She's just shaking in the dark. But she isn't alone. There's something else in the wall with them. A man whose skin is melted, his lips completely stitched together, dragging himself forward in the dark like a broken puppet. They manage to escape, but man, the nightmare does not end there. The knocks come back, but this time they're coming from the air vent. When they finally try to flee the apartment building altogether, they throw open the front door only to find the hallway is gone. It's been replaced by this endless corridor of identical doors, and every single one is numbered 304. And then a voice just echoes straight out of the walls. Iteration failed, restarting. The author wakes up alone. Jenna is gone. All her text messages are wiped. The hotel clerk claims she literally never existed. The author is trapped in this glitching, reality-bending nightmare that just keeps resetting itself. So, what exactly are we looking at here? I mean, are all these interconnected stories of 3:17 a.m. visitations evidence of ghosts? Is it some sort of glitch in the Matrix? Or is it something worse? Let's take a breath, cut the lights, and just let that supernatural dread peak for a moment. Because the reality we are about to uncover, it's honestly far more unsettling than any ghost story you've ever heard. Here's the truth. The monster isn't in the walls. It's right there in our biology. It's a medical condition called REM atonia. Essentially, it's a physiological glitch. See, when we sleep, our brains paralyze our bodies so we don't accidentally act out our dreams. But sometimes, the brain wakes up while the body remains entirely paralyzed. You are fully conscious, trapped in an immobilized shell, literally floating in a hybrid state between dreaming and waking. We call this sleep paralysis. And in that state, your hyperactive brain starts projecting your absolute worst nightmares directly into your waking reality. Medical journals have actually documented 3 specific types of sleep paralysis hallucinations. And notice how perfectly they match up with the internet horror stories. Number 1 is the intruder. This is the perception of a threatening presence in the room with you, just like the man in Unit 304. Number 2 is the incubus. That's a sensation of crushing pressure on your chest or feeling like a demonic figure is sitting right on top of you. And number 3, vestibular motor hallucinations. This is a floating out-of-body disorientation that completely warps your sense of the room itself. But what about the knocking, right? Those 3 sharp knocks at 3:17 a.m. Well, science has a name for that too. It's called exploding head syndrome. Now, despite the really alarming name, it's actually a benign parasomnia. It's a neurological disorder where individuals wake up to perceived loud, sudden noises. It can sound like a bomb going off, a gunshot, or a deafening knock on your door. But the noise doesn't exist in the physical world. Your misfiring brain is completely generating it. But that begs the question, why do some of us experience this sheer terror and others don't? Well, research shows that psychological trauma, PTSD, anxiety, and depression deeply disrupt our REM sleep cycles. And that leads to a hyperactive amygdala, which is the fear center of our brain. But it goes even deeper than that. We have traumatized genes. It turns out polymorphisms in circadian rhythm-related genes, like CSRT1, PER, and CLOCK, can actually leave us biologically vulnerable to these exact night terrors. Think about that. Your DNA might literally be programming you for a 3:17 a.m. visitation. And the wild thing is, humanity has been dealing with this biological terror for centuries. Long before the internet was a thing, we had to create cultural myths just to cope with the trauma of waking up paralyzed in the pitch dark. Just look at the global scale of this phenomenon. In Albania, it's a spirit called the Mokthi. In Bengal, they have the Boba, an entity that strangles sleepers. In Italy, they believe in malevolent local beings called Pondafecce that attack in the night. And in Canada, they call it the Old Hag, who sits directly on the victim's chest. It's the exact same biological glitch, just painted with different cultural colors. But let's be real, we don't really believe in the Old Hag anymore, do we? So instead of ancient spirits, our hyperactive modern brains require totally new avatars to explain the terrifying shadows standing in the corners of our rooms. We've effectively replaced the old myths with modern digital monsters. We create viral internet folklore to give a recognizable face to that physiological dread. Take the most famous internet creepypastas out there. You've got Slender Man, a faceless, unnaturally lanky figure standing silently in the dark. You've got Siren Head, a towering 40-foot skeletal entity broadcasting staticky voices and emergency alerts. These aren't just random spooky stories kids made up online. They are perfect modern representations of the towering auditory and visual intruder hallucinations generated by our own sleep-deprived, glitching minds. They are literally the internet's version of the sleep paralysis demon. And this deep-seated fear of unholy hours and knocking, it manifests in digital rituals too. Take the infamous 4chan creepypasta, The Midnight Game. It's a ritual to invite an entity into your home. The rules? You write your name and a drop of blood. You knock on a wooden door exactly 22 times before midnight, and then you have to survive in the dark until 3:33 a.m. The folklore constantly, obsessively circles back to the exact same neurobiological terrors: isolation in the dark, the paralyzing dread of the knock, and just trying to survive the deepest, darkest part of the night. So we've unpacked the science, the genetics, and the folklore. We've turned the lights on to reveal the clinical reality of the monster. But knowing it's just your amygdala misfiring, that doesn't make the shadow in the corner look any less terrifying when you're fully awake and trapped in your own paralyzed body. So I just have to ask you, what are you going to do the next time you wake up paralyzed in the dark and you hear a soft knock coming from inside your bedroom walls? I'm going to leave you with a final haunting warning from that r/no sleep file, iteration_035. The author wrote this to warn us of the reality-bending entity that feeds on our own awareness. Quote, "If you ever hear knocking in the walls at 3:17 a.m., do not answer, do not reply, and whatever you do, don't remember." Sleep well tonight, everyone, and we'll see you in the next explainer.